from aviation sector at this point in time. Firstly, Air India. Air India, in a span of hardly a year and a half, has been fined twice by the aviation regulator for as simple as not providing passengers enough basic facilities as per the norms that are out there.
So a little bit of deja vu, isn't it? Just the other day, Shweta, there was a story of IndiGo actually deboarding 8 passengers en route to Chennai at Bangalore airport, promising to put them on another flight, and then they never made it on the other flight which was scheduled to go and had to stay overnight and depart only the next morning. And one of the allegations that one of the passengers made against the airline, and I'm talking about IndiGo again, was that they weren't provided with accommodation at the hotel, at the airport. Now, that's exactly one of the causes for DGCA's 10 lakh rupee fine on Air India, because apparently Air India has also flouted on this basic requirement, the basic norm of providing accommodation to passengers who were scheduled on a certain flight and could not be taken for whatever reason. So that is one of them, and I think there's a long list of violations, but I think the one that really stands out to me is that passenger convenience and passengers who have paid for a full ticket need to be delivered the full service, and if for whatever reason an airline is not able to deliver that service, there has to be enough given in lieu of that required service. And I think providing accommodation is one of the most basic tenets, or putting the passenger on the next best option, the next best flight to the scheduled destination needs to be provided for. And sometimes I think airlines obviously try to maximize their own seats and don't like to pay additional money to another airline to accommodate a passenger. But this is something which was commonplace earlier. It used to happen till as recently as 6-7 years ago. You don't make it because the airline is overbooked and for whatever reason the airline is not able to accommodate you. They make the arrangements to put you on the next flight from the same terminal, whether it is their own airline or not, or even if it's a competitor airline, and end up either paying you the balance money if you're buying that ticket, or they do their own sort of sharing and balancing of books and put the passenger on the next flight. And if for whatever reason they are not able to do it, then the least they are expected to do is provide for accommodation. But I think these seem to now become very, very common violations, the new normal, if you may.
Where you don't want to really, give passengers some basic amenities. And by the way, these are norms that have been set up by DGCA. So it's important to note that this is an obligation on airlines.
So look at the whole history, Shweta, and you know how it's panned out over the last 18, 19, 20 years or so. And there was a time when there was no concept of low-cost carriers, right? You had full-service airlines. And then within the full-service airlines, you would go to the check-in counter, you would request for a seat with extra leg room, it would be provided to you. Gracias. No, remuneration, no sort of exchange transaction required. But that has stopped happening. Then
and a window seat.
Then the window seat or the aisle seat become premium seats. Earlier, a hot meal or a hot beverage or a cold beverage, complimentary Coca-Cola, complimentary candies, biscuits were all normal, right? So gradually you've seen that airlines are cutting down.
Absolutely.
And now I think even when you are trying to web check-in or you try to do the kiosk check-in, if you opt for a window or an aisle seat, there's a requirement to pay up, and which again DGCA has told airlines that do not charge because you have already paid for the ticket. So a ticket entitles you to a seat, and that seat could be any of the seats available out there. So I think gradually we are seeing the entry of low-cost airlines trying to get prices down for end consumers, competing with full-service airlines. Consumers, especially corporate consumers, as well as actually individual private consumers, preferring to take cheaper tickets as compared to better service. So that led to a decline in the sort of full-fare airlines per se. Full-fare airlines started mirroring low-cost airlines. So I think now the whole concept of low-cost airline doesn't exist. Price comparison, ticket by ticket, sector by sector is pretty much the same whether you're flying a SpiceJet or an IndiGo or an Air India or a Vistara or whatever. There's hardly any difference.
Absolutely. And you can't hold it against airlines.
True.
Operating an airline is a difficult business. You've got to make money through every possible measure, and that is what some of these airlines are doing at the moment, but not at the cost of passenger convenience. I think that is stated in the law, or stated in the rule book, at least put out by DGCA.
Right. So I think it's very simple. What do you value more? Do you value your balance sheet, your P&L statement looking greener, or do you value customers valuing your service and making it a habit to travel your airline.
Right.
So I think the good old days of customer loyalty, the good old days of making the customer feel special on board and really calling a customer a guest, something Vijay Mallya made infamously famous. Absolutely. That, you know, you're a guest on my airline. It's almost, I'm accommodating you in my private home or in my private sort of surrounding, and this is your abode and you're my guest, changing to, hey, you're a customer, you're a passenger, right? This whole issue of loyalty versus my books need to look better, greener, is something which is playing out, and you can't blame the airline specifically because they are obviously going through best themselves. Absolutely. And it's difficult to make money in that business, but at the same time customers expect certain basic decency, basic courtesy, and there are norms laid out by DGCA which need to be abided by.
Absolutely, norms needed to be abided by, and it's not just Air India which is in news today. IndiGo is also in news. Now IndiGo is facing a tax demand from Income Tax Authority to the tune of 1,666 crore rupees, stating that it did not pay up the required amount to the tax authority. So there's a tax demand that IndiGo has now challenged. Yeah, so it's an 8-year-old demand, 8 and 7-year-old demand. In fact, this 1,666 crore rupees is split into two tranches of 700 odd crores and 900 odd crores between assessment year 16-17 and assessment year 17-18, which is actually financial year 15-16 and financial year 16-17, wherein IndiGo is now saying that it's going to challenge that tax notice. Remember, this is not a GST notice, and we've seen the GST authorities have been very, very active. Super vigilant, and it started with gaming companies, but then, you know, as recently as yesterday, even companies like Zerodha and Swiggy are receiving GST demand notices. However, in the case of IndiGo, we are not talking about GST, we are talking about income tax. So there's an income tax demand notice which the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals has sort of, you know, stood in favor of, saying that IndiGo owes the Income Tax Department 1,600 odd crores. IndiGo is saying in its statement that it's going to challenge it. And it's going to challenge it on two counts. Number one, there is certain income on the books of IndiGo, and that income accrues from incentives from, you know, aircraft lessors and engine makers, etc., which need to be taxed or need to be, you know, reported differently, and there should be some tax incentive there. And the other are certain expenses which have been made, which, according to IndiGo and their statement, they haven't really been given an opportunity to sort of, you know, lay their case out in person. And they intend to appeal this demand of 1,666 crores and say that they have a strong enough case to appeal and perhaps not pay this tax. All right. So IndiGo, they're hoping to challenge that tax demand.